It's bad, ladies and gentlemen, really bad. This is the brand new Artillery into World of Tanks console. For the first time in over 5 years, we have a brand new artillery. You've probably seen quite a few if you've played today since the update went live in the morning UK time and of course early morning US time. This is of course the AKV 151 available in the shop for what I believe to be 7,900 gold, and if we were to look at how much that would cost you, it's just over £25 I believe, something like that. So like £27, so $35 or whatever it will be equivalent. But you might be thinking, oh, okay, new artillery, whatever. I mean, is it going to be bad in your games? Are you going to be getting taken out by this thing? Well, let's dive into this thing, stats, so you guys get the idea. And I've played already a few games in this tank. If we go over to the stats and we have a look at the tier 8 Swedish and artillery, we have played 5 games with a victory of 2, 40% win rate, and an average damage of 1,340. So in terms of my particular stats in the vehicle, it's pretty bad. And when we delve into why that might be the case, let's have a look at, for example, the average damage per minute. So 3,404. Okay, sounds pretty reasonable. I mean, that's relatively high for a tier 8 tank, considering that you are able to use this thing constantly and hopefully make some silver when you are playing the tank, which, you know, sounds great. But there is a big drawback to this tank. The 30-second reload means that you are essentially completely vulnerable when you are on a reload. It has a 3-shot autoloader, so with an intricate reload of 10 seconds. This does well, it gets changed dependent on what crew skills and stuff like that you're going to have. But ultimately, you do have to wait quite a while in between when you're firing off all 3 of your shells. They do 930 damage if you pen. The problem is if you pen. This tank has 88 pen on the vehicle, and that's not even the worst part. 88 pen, you can pen some vehicles, but for the most part, you're really not going to be able to reliably. In terms of splash damage, hitting anywhere from 150 all the way up to about 350, roughly, dependent on the thickness of the armor that you're actually hitting, sometimes upwards of 400, but it really is very difficult to pen vehicles, and that all comes down to one stat in particular, which is the elevation. 20 degrees of elevation makes this tank as an artillery piece pretty much useless, to be quite frank. This tank pretty much needs to be in line with the target that you are going to fire, which means not very many obstacles in between you and whatever you're going to be fighting. Now, if there is an obstacle in between you and whatever you're trying to fight, albeit, you know, click on, you basically can't hit them unless you expose yourself and actually trying to play like a TD, at which point you've got 0.51 accuracy and you do not have like the actual aiming reticle. So when you zoom in, you don't have a normal tank destroyer's gun, obviously, because you're using an artillery, which means you've got the trajectory view and the bird's eye view, I guess. And so, yeah. This tank has, of course, 4.5 degrees of gun depression, and the main way that you are probably going to get damage is counter-battering artillery, or counter-batterying artillery on the enemy side, because, of course, you can actually pen them reliably, and they are far enough away where no obstacles typically are going to be able to stop you from actually landing a shot. However, you've got to actually hit them, and often there are obstacles in between you, for example terrain, things like hills, that sort of stuff. That is the big problem. And so when you play the tank, you're finding that you can't really play it like a traditional artillery. You can't play it like a tank destroyer because you simply are in a much worse state than something like, for example, playing a Borsig or, you know, playing any of the traditional TDs. You're quite slow. 40 kilometers an hour is the top speed of this tank, but The main issue with the 40 kilometers an hour is that it isn't really ever able to get up to 40 kilometers an hour because of the fact that it has power to weight ratio of 11.48, meaning that it's very, very sluggish, slow to be able to get up to it. You can obviously, but it's just so slow that you probably aren't going to find it ever getting up to that relatively easily. So yeah, that makes it a lot worse as well. And there's no premium rounds, so you have no option to fire any other premium rounds with this vehicle. And if we grab up, for example, a comparison between, you know, the British or the American artillery piece at tier 8, and we look at the M4043, so this is hopefully fully upgraded. No, it is not. Okay, so let's grab up the Equalizer then, because it's another premium artillery. Let's use the 930 Alpha main armament. This actually gets a premium shell, which has a much bigger splash radius, so 5.34 meters. And the good thing about this is the fact that you also have similar sort of DPM. You've got a reload time of 16.82 seconds, and that is not, well, it's without a commander on this thing. So you haven't got a commander on this one. So not only have you got more splash radius, you also have slightly more penetration, and your DPM is effectively the same, and you don't have a huge reload in between when you can fire versus when you can't fire. Now there are two main armaments on, for example, the Equalizer, where you can use a kind of barrage mechanic or a single shot. So, you know, comparatively using the same actual main armament of the 930 Alpha, slightly different. But you can see this one gets 65 degrees of elevation. That is 3.25 times more elevation than the Swedish artillery piece, with more gun depression and more blast radius, more health. It gets a top forward speed of 56.3 kilometers an hour with a power to weight ratio of 18. So you're getting essentially like 70% more horsepower with an additional, 16 kilometers an hour top forward speed. It has a much bigger arc, I believe, on this tank compared. So your limit 30 degrees versus the AKV, which I think has 15 degrees. Or 22 degrees, so it's even got a bigger yaw limit, and yeah, I mean, the difference between the two is quite significant. And even combine that with the fact that the Equalizer also gets better camo, I mean, it's not a massive difference, but it just seems like the Equalizer is the choice to go for if you do want that 930 Alpha in a similar sort of manner. And whilst I think it's interesting that the Artillery Kanonwagen 151, I butchered the name, probably is interesting because it does get the 3-shot autoloader with 930 Alpha each time, and whilst maybe you will eventually find a Waffenträger E100 that does delve into your range, it's just not consistent enough. It's limited by the map that you play. For example, if you get Ensk, it's basically game over because the only thing you can really do is counter battery, because like 90% of the map is impossible to actually hit anyone, and then of course you're very limited by what you can do. Even if you are the best artillery player in the game, you're going to find it difficult to actually hit whatever it is that is going to be around, which I think is a big problem. I mean, like, if you cannot hit anything within 90% of the map because of the fact you have no elevation, it can be a problem. Now there's one thing I want to show you whilst we're actually in the game. I mean, we'll play. I have no idea if this is going to be any good. This is a live replay, so we're actually playing live. But I'll show you one trick that you can do if you do decide to pick this up. But let's talk about the price point, because obviously if you are after an artillery piece, I mean, the tank itself is relatively cheap. I mean, 7,900 gold for a tier 8 premium. It's not insanely expensive or anything, but of course it's not cheap. So yeah, £30, and there's very limited use to the tank. I find it very sluggish, very slow, and when you can't really do anything for like 90% of the map, even though you are fully reloaded with 3-shot autoloader, even when you do get the opportunities, because of the long interclip between when you can fire off all 3 of your shells, you can end up not doing a lot. Now this is something that I wanted to showcase off, is that you can use slopes to obviously increase your elevation. Like, I'm not brain dead. Yes, you can do that, but I mean, when you compare other vehicles that don't have to do that and they can literally do the exact same thing, it's not really like, yes, I mean, it's fantastic or whatever, but it's still not great. And of course, with the reduced splash radius of the tank being like 3.5 meters, you really have to pretty much hit head on if you want to do any amount of damage. So that is also a big negative. I mean, there we didn't hit very far away and we do 0 damage. We didn't even track the E4. So like, I mean, we could test it now, I guess, if we go like for a shot here. If it lands, I mean, it landed miles away, which was a bit unlucky. So that shouldn't really take precedent. But the problem I've been finding with this tank is just, yes, I mean, like, the range at which you can fire is not awful. I mean, it's 44 degrees. It gives you enough of a spread where it's not like you're having to constantly turn all of the time. But the problem is that arc. I mean, it just sucks. Like, even a small obstacle, so something minuscule, even a small rock, like half the size of this one right here, probably couldn't hit the E4. Like, even though with most other artilleries you'd be at least able to do that, it is definitely not the funnest experience. And there you go. So we actually missed that guy, did 200 damage. I mean, it is a low tier artillery. We've just been attemptedly blind fired by the enemy artillery. So I'm assuming it's another AKV. And I'm assuming he will be over in this location somewhere over here. Artillery view is completely knackered at the moment, but I assume the artillery will be somewhere here, if not like back here behind this rock. But once again, even if you're on like a slight slope, it means that you can't like hit half the map. So if we were to look down a slope, I mean, it's just chaos. Like, you're not going to be able to get any shots in. And you can see here we've only fired 1 shell. We can go for this Super Conqueror here, or Normal Conqueror. We hit him. That's an interesting name, a very interesting name, but yeah, I mean, what do you really do here in most situations? And of course, you have to have people to actually hit, and there we go, we've fired off our shell. So now we've got a long reload between when we can actually fire again. We are going to have to try and line up another target. Now we can go up here and go for the E5. But yet again, that could pose problems. And here we go. There's the Foch. It's going to be a very difficult shot to reliably hit. But because he's coming closer, we may be able to do it. Will he stop? Probably not. We'll go for a shot anyway. So we actually hit that guy direct. We've got the enemy artillery now looking at me. We've got no one covering the base, which probably means it's going to be game over for us. But maybe we could sneak up on the Foch, perhaps. The enemy artillery is over on the left somewhere. Of course, this is... The problem is that we could ideally go further back, and we would have been able to hit the Foch, but because we had to go up the slope to actually get the shot, we can't do that. Enemy artillery is over in the corner by the light tank, I think, somewhere over there. I'm surprised he's not actually spotted, but he might be behind the rock somewhere. But you can see we can't get a shot. And that is simply because the elevation isn't enough to actually be able to fire over. It's not because we can't actually hit. It's just simply we can't actually, like, elevate the gun enough to get an arc to actually hit over there. So which is why you're going to have to do something like this to be able to actually hit. And here's the T-54. Can we get a little shot into him? We need to do a bit of prediction. And so we get one into him. We might get blind fired. We'll go for another one. And now we're spotted, probably by the light tank. Yes, it is. There's no one actually spotting in their base. Is there any trees knocked down? Nope. Ooh, I think I saw the artillery. I do believe he's over here. And there he is. So let's hope we can hit. We missed. That's fine. Is he now going to bait us and go forward? I would assume he would. And now we've got boys coming on the right hand side. So you can see up to like 1300 damage. I mean, we've been alive for a long time. Any one of the enemy artillery hits could have actually taken us out. And it's just basically very much a struggle to just even get a simple amount of damage. Like the amount of shots that we fired and the amount of shots that we probably missed because of the fact we couldn't actually get a hit in has also probably been quite substantial. And whilst yes, you may be able to do 2000 damage, it's probably unlikely. We'll go for a shot on the Conqueror here. And of course it misses. Hopefully the FV will try and at least protect this guy. But we can't get the hit in. Let's prop up. I suspect the medium may come for me. No, he is in fact going. We can't get a shot again. Because the trajectory... Oh no, it's because... Let's see if we can get this Panzerjäger out the game. No, can't get a shot. Oh, we might be able to get him now. And now we won't be able to get him. Come on. Well, that's boring. And the enemy artillery is going to get us. Hopefully our tank destroyer will win the game, but I very much doubt it. This guy's just spotting for his teammate. Which is the play. And he's missed. Perfect. This guy's probably going to reposition somewhere. Try and surprise. There we go. Ideal. And we somehow survive. At least for now. I do believe this guy was over this way. The Minotauro should be able to win this regardless. Especially since he's on 1700 health. I don't think this guy will pen him, even if he is maybe a good person or a good player. Will be very unlucky if the Minotauro didn't manage to win the game. But you can kind of see the limitations of the tank. Because if we were playing pretty much any other tank, we probably would have been able to hit the Panzerjäger if it wasn't for the fact that we didn't have any elevation. Because you can kind of have a much bigger arc on the tank, which is obviously very, very big. But I'm going to set up in the middle of the map and see where this guy is. Now, I would assume that he has repositioned, or at least tried to go somewhere else other than where he was before. But you never really know. Minotaur is going through the middle. He'll probably end up in the cap circle. And there we go. We've managed to take out the final tank. But you can kind of see the big limitations with this one. And yes, whilst we did 1700 damage, it's nothing really. I mean, not for an artillery piece, especially considering you can play the M4043, which has much better coverage, is slightly faster, and has a much more consistent main armament without any limitations with its elevation. I just think this tank is diabolically bad, and in my opinion, I wouldn't recommend anyone actually picks this one up if you are an enjoyer of artillery. I mean, maybe they'll go ahead and buff it, give it a little bit more elevation, maybe another 5-10 degrees or something. In my opinion, it probably needs about 10 degrees extra elevation to make this tank somewhat competitive, or at least usable in most situations, because otherwise you're left with a tank destroyer basically with no pen. And without the ability to actually zoom in like a tank destroyer, making the tank pretty bad. So if we go ahead and look at the long, and go in, and we go to the scoreboard, the AKV 3k damage, but obviously it just depends whether or not you actually hit anyone in the game, even if you are decent at the game. Either way, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I wouldn't recommend it. There you go. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.